So, a new Dead Rising game has been leaked from a game news outlet, albeit a minor one. I'm here to give you the too long didn't read, and then my thoughts on it. So, according to the sources of MP First, this game will feature Frank West returning, once again, this time surviving an outbreak that happens on a film lot in Hollywood. There are several other major survivors in the game, many of them being actors on set, and it will feature some returning characters from the franchise, though the only one that was named was Isabella Keys. Apparently, this game features a different strain of the virus compared to the classic Dead Rising games, and they have confirmed that the time limit and photography mechanics will be returning, though no further details on them were given. The main villain is said to be a film director, and the time limit is apparently him threatening to blow up the studio if Frank and the actors do not do as he demands. The psychopaths are returning, and a few of them apparently work for him, including his right-hand man, who Frank will save early on in the game. Finally, the game has been in some form of development since 2023. Anything else mentioned in the article was speculation, so I'll call it there. Okay, let's start with the positive. I actually really like the idea of a Dead Rising game set in a film lot. It offers both great location and weapon variety, and the many jobs that are required for Hollywood to keep the lights on allow for a variety of survivors and zombie types to be used. That's an idea I can get behind. And the infamously fake nature of Hollywood, and even modern-day LA, depending on who you ask, is just ripe for commentary. I can personally see this as a case of the filmmaker and his crew seeing this outbreak as a chance to film something real and finally make a difference with their art, assuming they didn't have anything to do with causing the outbreak in the first place. And either way, it would be a worthwhile jab at the delusional side of the entertainment industry, even if the premise itself is a bit eye-roll-inducing. The choice to bring back Frank West and Isabella, on the other hand, I really dislike. Let's start with Frank. I am tired of him being Mr. Dead Rising. What I liked about the Dead Rising trilogy is that each game was a different character experiencing the consequences of Santa Cabeza and Carlito's choice to bring all of that to America. Dead Rising 1 was Frank covering the original outbreak, 2 was Chuck in Fortune City, and 3 was Nick having his hometown destroyed. But Frank is increasingly becoming the face of the series. Now, for the crossover games, that's perfectly fine, but every mainline game he returns to as the main star makes him feel larger than the world he inhabits, which is a big problem for a franchise that previously had a great sense of narrative scale, especially compared to its cousin, Resident Evil. Nowadays, if a zombie outbreak happens and Frank isn't there, did it really happen? Or did it even matter? Then there's a admittedly petty gameplay frustration I have. The camera system is allowed to be unique to Frank because he's the camera guy. Chuck and Nick don't get one. These two instead were built to make the combo weapon system make sense for them as their natural talents. Frank has inherited this talent not because it makes sense for him, but because he's the Dead Rising protagonist and Dead Rising games have combo weapons. And let's be real, if they had the self-restraint to not have this new game use combo weapons, they'd have the self-restraint to not bring Frank back for no reason. And finally, I am positive they're not going to bring TJR back to voice Frank, and I am tired of Frank not sounding like Frank. And for Isabella? Well, a lot of people don't like how Dead Rising 3 made her the overarching villain of the game, but any attempt to backtrack on that will undermine how she did help murder 53,000 people in Willamette, and ultimately never expresses any hard remorse. Especially when compared to how sad she gets over the idea of Carlito being punished for what he did, conveniently leaving herself out of that equation. The problem wasn't that she couldn't logically be that kind of villain, it's that it came off as rushed, especially after a more neutral appearance in Case West. Her inclusion in a game like this alone strikes me as a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And finally, there's the whole this is a new strain ordeal. First, Dead Rising is a parasite zombie series that simply spreads on a viral level. Now, this new strain detail implies it's meant to be a post-Dead Rising 3 game, because why the hell else would you need to justify a new zombie outbreak? Hell, even post-Dead Rising 3 shouldn't actually need that justification. Nick wouldn't magically produce a cure overnight, and it definitely wouldn't be distributed that quickly. There would be time for another outbreak or two before the cure is made. Now, if this is meant to be a prequel, then the quote-unquote need for a new strain makes even less sense, unless they want to make new zombie types without having to think of a reason like Dead Rising 2 and 3 did. Frankly, this plot point is what makes me doubt this leak. The rest sounds plausible, for better and for worse, but this sounds plain amateurish. Then again, given the plot, characterization, and writing to Resident Evil 8, it's not like Capcom has been infallible or anything. But the point is, you should not need something this drastic to narratively justify a new entry in the Dead Rising series, unless you want to deliberately move past the original Santa Cabezas storyline. But if that's the case, why bring back old characters? There's one other detail from the plot synopsis I left out earlier, in that one of the major characters would be a woman looking for her sister, which has some people thinking that it would be Stacy. On one hand, taking Stacy's offhand defense of Isabella back in Dead Rising 2 and trying to crowbar it into the two having met is a desperate but believable choice I could see them making. And if the game is going to have more than just Isabella return from past entries, there's not a lot of characters left alive that you could do. But if she's looking for her sister, that would imply she's still alive, which would then mean it's a prequel to Dead Rising 2, and Isabella's inclusion becomes confusing, since Case West implies that was the first time Frank has seen her since 2006. And if this isn't a prequel, but it is indeed meant to be Stacy, that means they're gonna say she went off the deep end and is looking for her long-dead sister, and I don't want to see that. So, yeah, if this rumor turns out to be accurate and we're getting a new Dead Rising game along these lines, sounds kinda mid. The gameplay could still be good, the setting actually is pretty cool, but the story sounds bad and desperate to bring back popular characters while having no clue what to do with the series that they want to continue with. Wait a minute. This actually is just Resident Evil 8.